Today, we are going to talk about Git terminologies in the context of working environment. These Git terminologies are more or less similar to the other versioning systems. For example, SVN. In this session, we are going to discuss about the terminologies as shown on the screen. The very first term is repository. A repository is a folder. You can consider it as a root folder or a root location where you will find all the metadata related to Git and all the files, all the folders related to the project. You can identify a repository if it has .git folder. So this .git folder will be hidden folder. Under this .git folder, you will get all the files and folders for the Git administrative task as well as configuration files. And outside of this .git folder, you will contain all the files and folders related to the particular project. Again, one thing that all these files and folders of project will be available under different branches. Let's see how repository will look alike on the cloud hosting service of GitLab. So this is the YouTube files repository. Over here, if I go this on repository section, you will get the same thing. So this is the YouTube files, the name of repository, and under this YouTube files, I have got all the files and folders and all the scripts and all those details which are required for my project. Now let's see how this repository will look alike on my local machine, on my system. Over here, as I have mentioned, that a repository will contain mainly two things. One is .git hidden folder and another is all the details, all the folders, files, scripts, everything which is related to particular project. So this particular section in this folder represent the details which is related to project, and this particular hidden folder called .git is related to Git administrative task, related to Git configuration files. So all the metadata related to Git will be available under this .git hidden folder. Repository based on the location can be of two types. It can be of local repository as well as it can be of remote repository or upstream repository. A local repository will be nothing else but a local copy of the central repository. It will be copy of the folder or the repository which is available on the remote location or on the central location, and you as a developer are going to work on this particular local repository. Then we will have remote repository or upstream repository. So it is the main copy of Git which will be available on either server or on the cloud. So you can set up your own Git server. It may be on Linux or Windows, but you can set up your own Git hosting server. Now in the cloud, you can consider Bitbucket, GitHub, GitLab, kind of the providers which will provide cloud-based Git hosting or Git repository hosting services. It will have URL for identification. So this URL will look something like this. So if I click on this YouTube files, so the URL of the repository will look something like this. Or if you click on this clone and over here, this will be the URL of that particular repository. Okay, so it will have identification that where the Git repository is available, on which location this central repository is available. If it is on the local server or intranet, it might have some IP address, or if it is on the some cloud-based services like GitLab, so you can have this kind of the URL. Now this remote repository, the central repository on your local machine, will be identified by an alias name called origin. Okay, so this is the default name which will be given to that particular remote repository, to that central repository on your local machine. In case if you have multiple repository, it can be like origin foreign1, foreign2, etc. So this remote repository will be used to pull and push the code, files, folders, everything from your local system to that central system. Also, it will be used for the collaboration between the developers to track the changes amongst the developer, like who has done what and all those stuff. As I have mentioned earlier, that origin is the alias name given to that central repository, upstream repository or remote repository on your local machine. You can get this URL like which origin is referring using either of this command, like git remote show origin or git remote -v. In case if you want to change this alias name, you can also change that particular name using this command git remote rename origin to the new alias name. Also, if you want another repository into your current working directory, you can also do that using this command git remote add alias name that you want to give and the URL of that central repository, upstream repository or remote repository. Let me show this. So over here, I will execute this command git remote -v, and you can see that this is the origin, the alias name, and this is the URL it is referring to. Okay, and this is from the terminal side, but in case if you want to see it from the folder perspective, let me go to the repository folder. Over here, just go to this hidden folder called .git. Over here, click on this config file, and you can see that remote origin, and this is the URL it is referring to. So over here we have two terms, one is remote and second is origin. So remote is referred as the remote repository or upstream repository or central repository available on cloud-based service provider like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, etc., or on your local server or any Windows or Linux server where you have hosted Git service. So it can be on intranet or it can be on internet. And origin is reference to that particular remote repository. So origin is the reference, it is the default alias name given to that particular remote repository, which we can change if we want to. Over here, when you use the command git clone, in that case by default Git will set origin as the alias name to that remote repository URL. In case if you want to change that particular alias name while cloning that particular Git repository, in that case you can use this command git clone --origin alias name and the repository URL. In that case, instead of having default alias origin, Git will use the alias name you have given in this particular command. We can have different repositories for the same project, like based on the modules. Like if you have the project in which you need to work on web development and mobile app development, then you might have two different repositories for those mobile and web development teams. Like one repository will be for web development, another repository will be for mobile app development. Based on environment as well, you can have different repositories like development, QA, UAT, staging and production. But there is no specific standard rule to create these repositories. It is entirely based on the person, that how he is preparing the Git architecture. Next term is branch. What is branch? So it contains all the files, folders, models, images, audios, videos, everything under the repository folder. Again, it is a kind of virtual space. Let me go to the cloud-based GitLab. Over here, let me go to this repository and then this branches. Okay, then I'm clicking on this main. So over here you can see that right now I am looking at the main branch of this YouTube files repository. Okay, so it will contains all the details related to that particular project, and it will look something like this. Now, how it will look like on my local folder? So it will look something like this. So let me step out from this Git folder. So over here, this particular portion except .git hidden folder will be considered as the part of branch. As I have mentioned under the section of repository, that all the files, folders, or all the details related to project will be available under the branch. So you can consider this as the branch. Now these files and all the other details related to particular project, it will depends on which branch a developer is working. For that, let me go to GitLab. Over here, I will go to another repository. So this is the another repository called taste, and over here I have different branches. Let me go to this master branch. In this repository, under master branch, I have following files. If I move towards dev branch, over here, apart from the files and folders from master branch, I have one extra file called textfile.txt. Okay, so based on the branch which I am working upon, the files, folders, and all the details related to that particular project will change. So if I am on master branch, then this textfile.txt file will not be there. And if I am working on this development branch, then in that case, this textfile.txt file will be there. If I go to the folder over here, so let me go to this folder of taste repository. So over here, you can see that I have got this file called textfile.txt. So hence I am on my development branch under this taste repository. We can verify the same using terminal. So let me go to this terminal, and I will go to this taste repository terminal section, and over here I can use this command git branch, and you can see that this dev branch. So over here *dev, this shows the current working branch. So the current branch on which I am working. The default branch is being called as main branch or master branch. So this main or master branch is the standard followed by the people, though it is not necessary or compulsory to name the branch as main or master. You can give any name as you wish. It will contain the actual working code without any bugs or issues. So whatever the code, files, folders, whatever the details will be there under this main branch or master branch will be free from bugs and issues. It will be working copy of the project. So it might not contain the latest code, but the code in that particular branch will be stable one. If you look at GitLab, and over here, as I have mentioned earlier, that dev branch has this extra file called textfile.txt, which is being worked by developer, and on the master branch there is no file called textfile.txt because it is yet to be completed, it is yet to be verified. Okay, so this is why on the master branch the latest changes will not be there. So branch is a line of development as per the definition from Git main page. A repository will have multiple branches, and these branches have different types. So if you are working on any kind of bugs, any kind of issues, then the branch type can be bug fix. If you are working on any new feature, any new requirement, then the branch type can be feature. If you are working on specific release which is related to UAT or production, then the branch type can be release, and we can have other type as well. Though these branch types will not be available in all the cloud hosting service providers. The next terminology is capital head versus small head. So when we say head having capital letters, It refers to the current branch. Whatever the current branch a developer is working on his or her local machine, that particular current branch will be considered as capital head. Now this head is a reference to one of the heads in your repository. So if you do not understand what do I mean by this particular sentence, give me a moment. I will explain you by going through those folders. Okay, so capital head will refer to small heads. Then we have one more term, detached head. Let's not consider it over here. Okay, so except this case, head will refer heads in the repository. Now if we talk about small head, so small head is a named reference to the commit at the tip of a branch. Over here, commit means whatever the changes that we have pushed to the central repository, upstream repository, or main repository, those changes will be considered as the commit. And to identify them, to have some identification of those commits, Git will use SHA1 algorithm, which will provide 40 characters name or 40 characters code to that particular commit to identify the commit, to identify that particular change. Let's understand it by going through this repository folder available on my local machine. So for this, I will go to this .git hidden folder. Over here, first we have talked about capital head. So this is capital head file. You can see that it is referring refs, heads, dev. So this is actually the location, relative path from the .git hidden folder. Now I will go to this folder again, .git folder, and from this git folder, .git hidden folder, we will use relative path. So the path was refs. So this is the refs folder, then heads. So this is the heads folder, and then dev. So I will open this file, dev, and you can see that over here we have 40 characters ID or name. We call it as a commit ID. And using this commit ID or commit name, Git will track the changes that I have done on my local repository. Before we discuss that, let me show one thing to you, that this is the commit ID starting from 944606 something. So let me go to GitLab. Over here, I will go to this commits, and over here I will change the branch to dev, and over here you can see that this is the commit ID 9446065. Okay, let me click on it. So you can see that this complete commit ID available in this URL. Let me copy it and paste it over here. So you can see that both the IDs are same, both the IDs are similar. So using this commit ID, Git will track that whatever the changes I have done on my local, the changes are available on the central repository, and again on the central repository on specific branch or not. And also one thing, that please do not temper these files because it is being used by Git. If you have tempered or done any kind of the changes, it might be possible that Git won't work properly. So okay, on this particular commit ID, you can see that the changes that I had done was, this is sample text file. So this is the line that I had added, and apart from this I had not done any kind of the changes. So let me do one thing, that let me open the file. I will go to this text file over here, and let's say I'm writing some random words. I will save it, and then from this terminal I will say git status, and you can see that it says that this file has been modified. So what it is doing is, it is referring this particular commit ID, and from this commit ID it is checking that whatever the changes I have done in this local repository, rather I have added any files, any folders, or rather I have changed any code. Okay, and let me remove it. I will save it, and again if I do git status, it will say that everything is up to date. So from this commit ID, it will track all the changes that I'm going to do in my local repository. Next, we have these two terms, clone versus fork. So clone and fork are more or less similar to each other. So clone is nothing but, you can say that you are copying, or definitely you are cloning the central or upstream repository to your local machine. So it will be from cloud or self-hosted server to your local machine. And this git clone command mostly being used for the cloning or copying the central or upstream repository on your local machines. Now we have another word called fork. So fork is to copy repository of another user under your account, and it is in the context of GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, etc. Let me explain using this GitHub. Okay, so over here I have two users. One is Nayan Kumar and another one is Nayan Gajjar on GitHub. And this is the repository, tips to enter into analytics field that I want to work on. And over here we have this option fork. So what I will do is, this tips to enter into analytics field is the repository of this user Nayan Kumar, and this Nayan Gajjar wants to work on this particular repository. So what this user will do is, the user will go to this particular URL, and then from this URL, this Nayan Gajjar user will click on this fork option. As soon as Nayan Gajjar user click on this fork option, the repository of Nayan Kumar will be copied under the account of Nayan Gajjar. So you can see that we have this repository over here. And once this Nayan Gajjar has made required changes, and when Nayan Gajjar wants to merge this repository to the actual one or real one, what Nayan Gajjar can do is, he can raise a merge request, which will be known as pull request, which will look something like this. So we will talk about this pull request later on, but this is how fork will work. Then we have server. So this is not the term or terminology in the context of Git, but just to let you know that a server is an instance where Git repository will be deployed. So you can have your own server where you can deploy Git services, Git repositories, or you can use some cloud-based service providers like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. So anyway, you can use this Git. Then you will have this client. So the client is a tool which will be used to connect to the server. Okay, so there's a tool, it may be local, like you need to install .exe or .db or any .rpm kind of the files. So you need to install them, and it will be available on your desktop, or it can be cloud-based. So it can be like cloud-based services where you need to log in and connect to your server. Some of the GUI tools which are available on Git website are as follows. These tools are like GitHub Desktop, Source Tree, Tortoise Git, Git extension. So these are the different tools that you can utilize to connect to the server. And through this tool, definitely you can use different commands like push, pull, create a pull request, create a merge request. So these are the different tools available to connect to the server. That's it for the day. Thank you for watching this video.